Why did her lungs feel like fire, and why was the smirk on his face the last thing she saw as the hatch sealed shut? Morgan pressed the emergency valve of the breathing apparatus again, once, twice, nothing. No air. The chamber filled with cold water, and panic scratched at the edges of her mind like 1,000 claws. She stared through the glass at the man outside. His finger rested casually on the control panel. He knew. He wanted this. A training accident, they'd call it. Another weak recruit unable to handle the strain. She thought, so this is how it ends. Not on some Black Ops mission behind enemy lines, not on foreign soil with bullets snapping the air, but in a simulation betrayed by her own. Her chest burned. Instinct screamed at her to fight, to reveal the truth, to use every skill buried deep beneath this fragile disguise she had so carefully crafted. But her father's voice cut through the chaos, calm and unyielding. The mission comes first, Becky. Always remember that. She clung to those words as darkness tugged at her edges. And then her mind snapped back to 2 weeks earlier. A different suffocation, not from water but from humiliation. Stand at attention when I'm talking to you, recruit, spit flecked her cheek. The booming voice of Petty Officer Carlos filled the training yard. At barely 5'3", looked impossibly small in front of him. His shadow stretched over her as if the sun itself obeyed his contempt. The other recruits stood frozen, their relief palpable that it wasn't their turn under his fire. Some smirked. Most just stayed silent. The scar along her throbbed, a phantom reminder of a different fight, a different knife. She forced herself to stare forward, rigid, impassive. It wasn't real, she reminded herself. This was theater. An ugly performance, yes, but a role she had to play. Leaned closer, his voice dropping into a low, mocking growl. I don't think you're cut out for this, Morgan. Look at you. You can barely hold yourself up. What made you think someone like you belongs here? Her mind flashed, her father's hand pointing toward the horizon years ago on the deck of the USS Sentinel. That's why we serve, Becky. Not for what we see, but for what lies beyond. She'd been 7, salty wind in her hair, his words etched forever into her. To serve my country, sir. Her voice now was steady, automatic, the kind drilled into every recruit. His laugh was like gravel. Serve your country. You'll be lucky to serve coffee in the mess hall. That is, if you make it through my training. He gestured to the obstacle course. Mud pits, ropes, walls. A brutal gauntlet already shining with the sweat and failures of the morning. Had already run it twice this week, alone. Each time he'd forced her to shave down her time. This time 2 minutes less. Impossible, deliberate. A trap. His whistle cut the air. Clock starts now, move it. Her legs launched forward before thought could catch up. Every line of her body screamed with determination, but her mind whispered the truth. This wasn't about fitness. This was about breaking her, making the others hate her, isolate her, bury her in resentment. Lieutenant Sarah Westbrook watched from the sidelines, clipboard against her chest, observant, too observant. She'd been watching for days and could feel it, the curiosity, the suspicion. Didn't need more eyes on her, not now. Faster, Morgan, you're dragging down the whole damn platoon. His voice followed her into the mud crawl. The cold clay sucked her in, heavy, punishing. She stumbled, face plunging into filth. For a moment, just a moment, she wanted to let go, to let it all slip away and show them the truth, that she wasn't some weak recruit, that she could dismantle in seconds if she chose. But she didn't. She wiped mud from her eyes, deliberate, slow. Her fists tightened, then released, controlled, always controlled. She emerged gasping, but before she could find footing, the stopwatch clicked. Smirk widened. And you failed. Not just yourself, Morgan, your entire platoon. A groan rippled through the unit. 50 push-ups for everyone except her. Grabbed her shoulder. Not you, Morgan, you get to watch. Watch what your failure costs. 23 bodies dropped in unison. Glares pierced her like bullets. One muttered, "Thanks a lot, princess." Stood silent, the mud still dripping, her face unreadable. Calculation, not pain, flickered behind her eyes. And then Westbrook's voice. "That's enough, petty officer. She cut the tension like a blade, bristled but followed her away. Conversations disguised as professional gestures but knew. They were talking about her. They were always talking about her. In the classroom later, the words of naval history blurred around her. She sat back corner, still streaked in mud, taking notes with meticulous precision. Her fingers dirt-stained but her letters neat, exact. When another recruit hissed, "Why don't you just quit already? Nobody wants you here," she barely turned. "I earned my place." The whisper of a smile touched her lips, not from pride but from something deeper. Knowledge, patience. The kind of smile that belonged not to a recruit but to someone waiting, calculating, observing. She tucked notes into her journal later that night. Not the journal of a struggling recruit. No, every entry was precise, coded. Tactics, recruits' reactions, Westbrook's watchful eyes, and in the margin, an evaluation of psychological isolation techniques. Hazing disguised as training. Her fingers brushed a small compass in the hidden pocket of her uniform. Scratched, worn, steady, her father's compass. His voice seemed to echo again, "When all else fails, Becky, this will guide you home." She let her breath steady around it. Home. A word she hadn't felt in years. And yet, as she lay awake in the barracks, listening to the snores of others, her mind drifted, not to cruelty or Westbrook's suspicion, but to a coffin draped in a flag. 3 years ago. The Navy said boating accident. She knew better. Admiral Porter's whispered words after the funeral haunted her still. "Your father's work isn't finished. When you're ready, find me." Her scar itched that night, not from the mud, from memory. Caracas, 2 years ago, a knife flash in a dark alley, her first mission, her first near death. She had survived, but not without reminder. She hid it well until the showers. The momentary slip of her towel revealed it, a jagged mark carved into her ribs. Wilson's voice echoed across the room. "That's no kitchen accident, Morgan." The eyes of the others followed. Her cover cracked. By morning had his ammunition. He paraded her scar before the platoon, taunting, digging. She gave nothing. No flinch, no story beyond kitchen accident. He prowled her silence like a shark smelling blood. But Westbrook interrupted again. Her timing precise, her presence a shield. She didn't know what she was protecting, but she felt it, saw it in her eyes, a flicker of recognition, a suspicion of patterns, the kind that haunted her too. That night punished again, scrubbing floors until midnight. His words sharp, cruel. "You don't belong here. Quit before you hurt yourself, or before someone gets hurt for you." He left her there, toothbrush against tile, the smell of bleach rising. And she scrubbed, steady, deliberate, like someone trained for it. Like someone who had scrubbed under duress before, not as punishment, but as survival. Across the base, Lieutenant Westbrook couldn't sleep. Her computer screen glowed with file. Yale graduate, political science, military family, but gaps, so many gaps. And her father, Robert Morgan, a Navy officer with entire sections blacked out, classified. She cross-referenced dates, places. One name surfaced again and again, Commander Victor Shaw. And she froze at the memory of her sister. Bright, strong, unshakable, found dead under Shaw's command. Suicide, they said, but the note, the words, none of it had ever sounded like her. Westbrook leaned back in her chair, pulse racing. Morgan wasn't just another recruit. She was something else, something dangerous. And in the darkness of the barracks, traced the outline of her father's compass under her pillow. Adaptation isn't just a skill, Becky. It's survival. She closed her eyes, but not to rest, to wait. Because she knew what Westbrook suspected, what Shaw had buried. She wasn't just here to survive training. She was here to uncover something, to finish what her father started. And in the morning, the water would test her again. But this time, the water wasn't her enemy. It was the battlefield. Why did she look so calm as the water closed over her head? Most recruits panicked in the first 30 seconds. Didn't. Her lungs ached, her arms moved with slow precision, and yet there was something deliberate in every stroke. Weighted belt, fatigue-soaked, 10 extra pounds dragging her down. Cruel little gift. The others flailed, their desperation splashing at the surface. She remained steady, almost too steady. "Look at her," muttered under his breath. His jaw tightened. For weeks he had expected her to crack. He had wanted it, needed it, but she never broke the way he thought she would. Lieutenant Sarah Westbrook's pen hovered over her clipboard. She shouldn't have cared, but she did. Something about movements didn't belong here. They weren't the improvisations of a desperate recruit. They were calculated, efficient, almost professional. "Keep going," barked, packing the pool's edge. His voice rose for the others, but his eyes stayed on her. Didn't look up. She couldn't. If she met his eyes, something might slip. "Breathe, control it. Breath is life, panic is death." Her father's words filled her head. She slowed her heart rate, her mind drifting for a split second to another pool, another life. Langley's training facility. Hours spent holding herself at the edge of blackout, her instructors watching with stopwatches and steel eyes. This wasn't new. This was muscle memory. When finally blew the whistle, slipped toward the ladder, silent, unreadable. Westbrook met her with a towel. "Impressive work, Morgan," she whispered. Gave the standard recruit answer. "Thank you, ma'am." But her eyes carried something sharper. That night, recruit Wilson approached her in the barracks. Not with mockery this time, with suspicion. "Where did you learn that stroke? That wasn't Navy training, that was something else." Kept polishing her boots. "My father taught me to swim before I could walk." "Not like that." Wilson's voice pressed harder. "That was combat technique, weighted survival. My uncle was a SEAL, I've seen it before. Where did you really learn it?" His hand stilled just for a second. Then, without looking up, she asked, "Do you think this shine will pass inspection?" Wilson stared, recognizing the deflection, but she didn't push. Instead, she muttered, "Some of us are tying knots after lights out. Come if you want." Then she walked away. It was small, but it was the first olive branch. Waited until the lights dimmed before pulling her leather case from the bottom of her locker. She didn't open it, just touched it, reassured by the weight of what it contained. Evidence, tools, secrets that couldn't be discovered. The showers were her only mistake, the scar, that jagged reminder of Caracas. She had turned too quickly, soap slipping, towel falling just enough. Wilson saw, others too, and suddenly the whispers spread like wildfire. By morning had his ammunition. "Kitchen accident." His voice mocked her in front of everyone. "That's one hell of a kitchen, Morgan." She didn't blink, she didn't explain. Her silence was her shield, but inside she knew. Each question, each whisper, each scar tugged at the thin threads of her cover. That night, scrubbing floors under his watch, she let the toothbrush scrape tile in perfect rows. He leaned against the door, arms crossed, his voice venom. "You don't belong here. Quit before you hurt yourself, or before someone gets hurt for you." Didn't look up. "I won't quit, sir." And for the first time, something flickered in his expression. Not amusement, not satisfaction, something closer to unease. But if it was a storm pressing down on her daily, Westbrook was a different kind of pressure. She dug through files late at night. History, her father's record, and with each search she found more gaps, more blacked-out lines. Robert Morgan, USS Sentinel, Operation Ocean Shield, redactions stacked on redactions, and always the name Victor Shaw surfacing in the margins like oil on water. Westbrook leaned back in her chair, eyes burning from the screen's glow. She thought of her sister, her smile, her sudden death in sand, suicide, they said. But Sarah had read that note 100 times. It had never sounded like. Now she stared at Morgan's file and felt something stir that she had buried for years. Suspicion, anger, hope. The first Liberty weekend arrived 6 weeks into training. For most recruits, it was escape, beer, phone calls, a taste of freedom. For it was cover. She waited until dusk, until the groups had left for town, then slipped through a secondary gate with a forged casualness. The guard barely looked up. 3 blocks later, she unlocked a nondescript sedan, keys hidden where only she knew. The road wound inland. A farmhouse, abandoned to anyone else's eyes, waited in the shadows. Inside the cellar, walls shifted with the touch of her hand. Steel replaced rot. Lights hummed alive. At the desk, Daniel Holt barely looked up. His hair was silver, but his bearing carried decades of command. "You're late," he said flatly. "Had me cleaning the head until 2200. Her voice was sharper here, stripped of recruit softness. Her posture changed, her eyes sharpened. Morgan, the recruit, was gone. In her place sat the operative, the daughter of Robert Morgan, Project Neptune. Holt studied her flash drive, his expression darkening as he scrolled. "You're right. Isn't just hazing, he's filtering, identifying who breaks, who bends, who disappears." Leaned forward, her tone cold. 3 of his recruits were transferred, 1 dead, 2 under Shaw's command. He's building something. "A unit," Holt said grimly. "The kind no one admits exists. Shaw keeps to the shadows, but he leaves fingerprints, is one of them." His jaw tightened. "So it's true. My father was forced out because he saw it, because he couldn't be controlled." Holt met her gaze. "And they'll try to force you out too, if they discover who you really are." For a moment, her father's compass weighed heavy in her palm. She whispered to herself, "For you, Dad, and for everyone they've hurt." But the mission wasn't about whispers anymore. It was about evidence, about bait, about and the accident he was preparing. The next morning broke red over the water. His voice carried across the parade ground. "Admiral James Whitman will inspect today. Every corner, every surface. Fail, and your careers end before they start." He singled her out, of course. The bathrooms, the hardest assignment, the trap. But when Whitman arrived, his white glove found nothing but shine. The bathroom gleamed, stood silent, damp uniform clinging. And in that dampness, Whitman saw something no one else had. A shadow beneath the fabric. The outline of ink. "Recruit Morgan," he said slowly. "Is that a tattoo?" Time seemed to freeze. Eyes narrowed, waiting for her downfall. Westbrook shifted, curious. His voice was calm. "Yes, sir. Family emblem, naval history." Whitman's gaze sharpened. He remembered. A night in the Indian Ocean, years ago. A mission no one spoke of. A man named Robert Morgan saving his life. And on his back, that same trident tattoo, intertwined with anchor and symbols only a few ever carried. "Everyone out," Whitman ordered. His voice cut like steel. The room emptied. His protest died on his tongue. Alone, Whitman whispered, "Show me." Unbuttoned slowly, revealing the full design. The trident, the anchor, the symbols of Project Neptune. Whitman's face drained. "That tattoo isn't for family, it's for operatives." "I earned it," she said quietly. "You're not just his daughter," Whitman murmured. "You're Neptune." Didn't answer, she didn't need to. At 1300, she sat in Whitman's office, facing not only the Admiral but also Captain Hayes of Naval Intelligence and Lieutenant Westbrook, confusion etched on her face. Hayes studied her. "Recruit Morgan, or should I say Lieutenant Morgan, Naval Intelligence, Project Neptune." Silence was confirmation enough. The truth, once hidden beneath scars and mud, had surfaced. And in that truth, everything shifted. What did a tattoo mean, really? Just ink under skin. A symbol, a mark. Yet when Admiral Whitman saw it, his face changed as if the floor had dropped beneath him. That was the moment everything shifted. The secret she had buried in her flesh was no longer just hers. In Whitman's office, the air felt heavier than steel. Oak panels, photographs of ships, the weight of tradition. Sat at rigid attention, the perfect recruit. But no one in that room believed she was just a recruit anymore. Not Whitman, not Hayes, and certainly not Westbrook, whose confusion simmered with every passing second. "Project Neptune," Hayes said at last, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. "That emblem is reserved for activated operatives, not family, not dependents, only those who served. Explain yourself." His eyes didn't waver. The program was never disbanded. It was restructured. I was recruited at 17, activated at 19. I'm here under Admiral Porter's authority. Westbrook blinked hard, trying to process the words. 17. Activated at 19. That meant for the past 4 years, the young woman she thought was a fragile recruit had been living an entirely different life. Under whose orders? Whitman demanded. Admiral Porter, Pacific Command. The name hit the room like a charge. Hayes straightened, her jaw tight. Whitman muttered something low, almost to himself. Porter was a man who carried shadows with him. If he had authorized this, then everything about's presence here was bigger than sea tide, bigger than training. The secure line crackled minutes later. Porter's gravel voice filled the office. Her presence there is authorized. The assessment is legitimate, but the identification wasn't part of the plan. Whitman pressed. Sir is unpredictable if he suspects. Negative. No one outside this room is to know her identity. Not anyone. Stood silent, her heart steady. Orders, always orders. But when Porter's voice reached her through that speaker, a part of her softened. Her father's old friend. The man who whispered at the funeral, your father's work isn't finished. The line went dead. The room exhaled. Hayes turned sharply to, you'll maintain cover until extraction. Appearances must remain intact. Continue as a struggling recruit. Do you understand? Yes, ma'am. Westbrook finally spoke, her voice taut. So all of it, the stumbles, the failures, the mud, the exhaustion, it was all His gaze shifted to her. Not all of it. Authentic conditions produce authentic reactions. What you saw was real, just not the whole of it. Westbrook shook her head, something like betrayal tightening her throat. You were watching us, evaluating us. Didn't flinch. That's what I do. Observe, analyze, connect patterns. Then, softer, her eyes locked on Sarah's. And I know you're still searching for the truth about your sister. The room fell into silence. Westbrook froze, her blood cold. No one had spoken's name aloud here. No one dared. How could you possibly know that? His voice lowered, because it's connected more than you realize. Whitman's cough broke the tension. Enough. Operational security remains the priority. Lieutenant Morgan will continue her cover. Lieutenant Westbrook, you will carry on as if none of this was said. Dismissed, returned to her platoon. But the weight of what had been spoken pressed heavy. Secrets were no longer hers alone. Westbrook now carried a sliver of them, whether she wanted to or not. That night in the empty barracks, Westbrook found her waiting. Not in uniform this time, but in civilian clothes. A different posture. A different. You shouldn't be here, Westbrook whispered, glancing around. Neither should you, answered. She slid into the passenger seat of Westbrook's car. The abandoned gas station lot smelled of salt and rust. 21:30 hours. The time had come. For the first time, Sarah Westbrook saw the woman behind the mud and the scars. Not a struggling recruit, not a frightened girl, but a composed operative with eyes sharpened by training and loss. I need your help, said simply. Help, Westbrook's voice cracked. You've been lying to me for weeks, Morgan, watching, testing, and now you want me to trust you. Didn't flinch. She pulled a flash drive from her jacket and held it out. Because you want the truth about, and I have pieces of it. Sarah stared at the small device, her hand trembling as she took it. Leaned closer. Isn't just abusive. He's part of a pattern, recruits pressured beyond regulation. Those who break in certain ways disappear. Those who resist sometimes die. 3 so-called accidents in 18 months, all connected to him, all linked back to Shaw. The name hit Sarah like a punch. Commander Victor Shaw, the same officer who had overseen's last assignment. The same man Sarah had suspected for years, though no one had listened. Slid a folded photograph into Sarah's hand, smiling in uniform, and at the edge of the frame Shaw, too close, too familiar. Sarah's throat tightened. Where did you get this? From a file you weren't allowed to see. Filed a harassment complaint against Shaw. It was buried, classified. The note you read at her death, it wasn't her handwriting. Sarah blinked hard, tears threatening, but's tone was steady, clinical. They identify, isolate, pressure, and then erase. Your sister stumbled onto something bigger, is part of it, and he's planning something for tomorrow's underwater evacuation drill. That's when he'll move. Sarah's breath caught. You think he'll target you? Silence was answer enough. You're using yourself as bait, Sarah whispered. Nodded. It's the fastest way to get evidence. The recording device will capture everything. But I need you to make sure safety protocols aren't permanently. I need you to be my second set of eyes. Sarah's grip tightened on the steering wheel. If I'm even a second too late. I'm trained for this, and I won't go in unprepared. His hand brushed the compass in her pocket, her father's compass, steady north always. Sarah Westbrook looked at the flash drive again, his photograph burning in her lap. Rage and grief battled inside her, tempered only by duty. At last she said, I'll help you, but if it's tied to Shaw, this won't stop with one drill. They'll try again. His eyes hardened. Then we end it before they can. As disappeared into the night, Sarah sat alone in her car, her sister's smile staring back at her. For years she had been told to let it go, to accept the official story. Now she knew, hadn't been weak, she hadn't broken, she had been silenced. And Sarah Westbrook would not be silenced. Half a mile away, a dark sedan idled. A man's voice whispered into a secure line. Subject made contact with Westbrook as anticipated, proceeding to phase 2. On the other end, Victor Shaw's reply was calm, cold. Maintain surveillance. I want to know their next move. The game was in motion, the board was set, and tomorrow's drill would decide who survived to keep playing. Why did the pool feel colder than ever before? Maybe it wasn't the water. Maybe it was the way his eyes lingered on her that morning, a little too long, a little too satisfied, adjusted the strap of her training harness and kept her breathing steady. Calm in, calm out. Panic was death. The underwater evacuation chamber loomed ahead like a steel coffin tipped on its side. Recruits whispered nervously as the instructors gave the safety brief, but already knew the words by heart. The chamber would flood, the hatch would seal, and the recruits would have to execute a controlled escape under pressure. In theory, it was designed to build confidence. In practice, it was a perfect place for an accident. Prowled before them, his voice deceptively casual. This drill separates those who belong here from those who don't. The water has no mercy. Neither do I, his smirk found, as if the words were meant for her alone. Sarah Westbrook stood at the far end, clipboard in hand, eyes darting between and the control station. She had barely slept the night before. The flash drive had given her was locked in her desk drawer, burning in her mind. The truth about the photograph, the complaint against Shaw, it was all real. Now she stood here, caught between duty and a rising storm of personal vengeance. Filed into the chamber with 5 others. The door clanged shut, sealing them in steel. The sound of pumps echoed as cold water gushed in. Around her, recruits shifted nervously, faces taut with fear. One began to hyperventilate, another whispered a prayer. Steadied her pulse. She had done this 100 times under harsher conditions. Blindfolded, waited, at depths no recruit ever saw, but today wasn't about proving she could survive. It was about proving would try to make her fail. The water rose to their waists, then to their shoulders, then higher. His lungs filled with the sharp chill of memory, her father's voice at the lake when she was 6. The water isn't your enemy, Becky. Respect it, understand it, master it. But then she felt it. The faint, unnatural delay in the emergency release. A mechanical hitch, small enough to be dismissed as malfunction. Her eyes flicked to the observation window. Was there, leaning against the console, too relaxed, too smug. His finger hovered near the override switch. His chest burned not from fear but from fury. It was happening, exactly as she predicted. The chamber filled to the ceiling. Darkness closed in. Her recording device, hidden in her undershirt, captured everything: the sounds, the timing, the irregularities. Beside her, a recruit's hand clawed frantically at her arm. She pushed it back, forcing herself to look weaker than she felt, struggling against the rising pressure. Inside, her training screamed at her, "Hold steady. Don't reveal. Survive." Seconds stretched into eternities. The hatch should have opened. It didn't. In the control room, Westbrook's pulse spiked. Her eyes darted to the console. The override indicator blinked red. His hand pressed casually against the panel, keeping it engaged. "Sir," she said sharply, "the cycles exceeded regulation time." "Didn't turn. They need to learn to push past their limits." Westbrook stepped closer. "You're overriding the—" He gave her a cold smile. "Do you have a problem with that, Lieutenant?" Her throat tightened. This was the moment. If she pushed too soon, she risked tipping her hand. If she waited too long, could drown. Inside the chambers, vision narrowed. The edges darkened. She thought of her father, of the compass, of his photograph burning in Westbrook's pocket. She wasn't here for herself. She was here for them. At the last possible second, Westbrook slammed her hand down on the manual release. Alarms blared. The hatch groaned open. Water rushed out, sucking the recruits with it. Staggered onto the deck, coughing, gasping, performance as much as necessity. She let herself collapse to her knees, heaving for air. Around her, the others lay sprawled, trembling and pale. To everyone watching, she looked like she had barely survived. But her hand slid subtly against her undershirt, checking. The recorder was still there, still working, evidence secured. Stormed across the deck, his face twisted with rage. "What the hell was that, Lieutenant?" he barked at Westbrook. "You compromised my training exercise." Westbrook met his fury with icy calm. "I enforced regulations. The chamber exceeded safe duration by 32 seconds. 32 seconds makes warriors," he snapped. 32 seconds makes corpses," she shot back. For a moment the two locked eyes, his blazing with barely restrained violence, hers with steely resolve. The recruits watched in silence, sensing something far bigger than training unfolding before them. Forced herself to cough harder, drawing glare. His lips curled into something between a sneer and a promise. "This isn't over, Morgan." Later in the barracks, sat alone, drying her hair, her scar hidden again beneath fatigues. Wilson sat nearby, staring at her with something that wasn't quite suspicion anymore, more like unease. "You should drowned in there," Wilson muttered. "But you didn't." His eyes lifted slowly. "Everyone has something they don't talk about." Wilson frowned. "Like that scar." Didn't answer. She just returned to her boots, polishing until the leather gleamed. When the lights went out, she lay awake, listening to the steady breaths of the others. Her hand brushed the compass beneath her pillow. The needle never wavered. Neither would she. Across the base, Sarah Westbrook sat in her car outside her quarters, staring at its photograph again. For years, the official line had been her sister cracked under pressure. Tonight, Sarah had watched nearly manufacture the same fate for someone else. The pattern was undeniable. Hadn't cracked. She had been broken deliberately. Sarah pressed her forehead against the steering wheel, whispering into the darkness. "I'm sorry, Em. I should have seen it sooner." A shadow moved in the mirror, a dark sedan at the end of the street. Watching, waiting. Sarah's stomach dropped. She knew instinctively this wasn't just about anymore. Whoever Shaw had watching them, they knew she was involved now too. In another office, poured himself a drink, his hand trembling with rage. He had come so close. 30 more seconds and the problem would have solved itself. Morgan would have been gone, but Westbrook had interfered. Westbrook, with her damn clipboard and her suspicious eyes. He stared at his reflection in the darkened window. For the first time, doubt crept in. Whitman's inspection. The tattoo. Westbrook's defiance. Pieces were moving beyond his control. He picked up his phone, dialing a number he wasn't supposed to call unless things escalated. When the line clicked open, a man's voice answered, smooth and cold. Report. Swallowed hard. There's a complication. Morgan survived, and Westbrook, she knows something. The silence on the other end was worse than shouting. Finally, the voice replied. Then it's time to accelerate. Keep them close. We'll handle the rest. Lowered the phone, sweat on his brow. For the first time in years, he felt fear. Back in her bunk, closed her eyes. Sleep didn't come. Instead, her father's voice returned again and again. Every environment has advantages if you know how to find them. Tomorrow she would have to find them all. Why did Admiral Whitman's hands tremble as he poured his morning coffee? For decades he had faced storms at sea, crises on ships, the weight of command itself. But what Morgan carried in her silence, that tattoo etched into her skin, haunted him in a way enemy fire never had. Because it meant one thing: the ghosts of Project Neptune weren't gone. They had returned. In the war room, the lights were low, the walls lined with screens flashing maps and coded transmissions. Whitman sat with Captain Hayes, head of Naval Intelligence, reviewing the after-action reports of the previous day's drill. Had exceeded safe duration by 32 seconds. Training error, his written explanation read. Whitman didn't buy it. Hayes didn't either. Hayes tapped the file with a pen. He knew what he was doing. That override was an accident. He was trying to drown her. Whitman leaned back, his face etched in shadow. And he almost succeeded. If Westbrook hadn't intervened, he let the words trail off. Hayes studied him. You've seen that tattoo before. Whitman hesitated, then admitted, once, years ago in the Indian Ocean, a covert boarding mission. Robert Morgan led the team. I was there. They saved my life. That emblem belonged to men who didn't officially exist. Hayes's eyes narrowed, and now his daughter wears it. Whitman's voice dropped. Which means Porter was right. Neptune wasn't just dissolved, it was hidden. Operatives buried in plain sight. Morgan isn't a recruit, she's an asset. Hayes closed the file with a snap. If it's tied to Shaw, then they'll see her as a threat. They'll try again. Whitman's gaze hardened. Then we don't give them the chance. But even as he said it, he knew the truth. Shaw's reach ran deep. Orders could be twisted. Evidence could disappear. Wasn't safe, not here, not anywhere inside this machine. At that very moment was back in formation, her face unreadable as the morning sun burned across the parade ground. Paced before the recruits like a predator circling prey. His eyes never left her. She stood still, rigid calm, though inside her pulse matched the beat of the drums that had marked her father's funeral. Steady, relentless. Eyes forward, barked. His voice cut sharp but barely heard it. She was listening to something deeper, the echo of water, the hiss of air, the shadow of Shaw pulling strings through men like. Wilson stole a glance at her, then quickly looked away. The suspicion hadn't vanished, but something else was forming now. Respect. No one had missed the way, endured the chamber drill. No one could deny she had held longer than most of them could have. After dismissal, Westbrook intercepted her. Clipboard clutched like a shield, but her eyes softer, searching. We need to talk. Followed her into a storage shed at the far edge of the training field. Dust hung in the shafts of sunlight, the smell of oil and rope thick in the air. You almost died yesterday, Sarah said, her voice breaking the silence. His answer was steady. That was the point. Sarah's jaw tightened. You're reckless. Shook her head, calculated. He showed his hand, and I got it on record. She tapped her undershirt where the recorder had been hidden. Sarah stared at her. You're not just fighting for yourself, are you? His hand brushed her pocket where his photograph rested now, given back after Sarah had studied it 100 times. Her voice dropped. Your sister didn't break, she was broken, and I won't let them bury that truth. For a long moment, silence filled the shed. Dust floated like tiny stars between them. Sarah's throat tightened. She had always carried death like a private wound, a secret ache she could never heal. And here stood Morgan, breathing life back into the questions she had been too afraid to chase. Finally, Sarah whispered, Then we do this together. Nodded once. No smile, no relief, just an understanding, trust forged in fire. That night the two of them sat in Sarah's quarters, blinds drawn, laptop open, inserted the recorder. The tinny sound of water pumps filled the room, followed by his voice, calm, smug, deliberate. 32 seconds stretched out like eternity. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. That's intent. His tone was clinical. It's enough to raise suspicion, but not enough to convict. He'll claim it was training, a stopwatch error. We need more. Sarah leaned back, exhausted. More will mean risk. His eyes didn't waver. Risk is the only way this ends. Meanwhile, across base housing, sat in his kitchen with a glass of whiskey, his hands shaking. The call from Shaw still echoed in his ears. Accelerate. Keep them close. We'll handle the rest. He stared at the bottle, wondering if Shaw would really protect him if this spiraled, wondering if perhaps he had already gone too far. But then his phone buzzed. A text, no name, just a number, meeting, 2300 pier. Drained the glass and went. The pier was deserted, waves slapping against pylons. A figure stood in shadow, tall, composed, voice smooth as oil. "You're losing control," the man said. Bristled. "She's tougher than I expected." "That's because she's not who you think she is." The man stepped closer. A scar across his jaw caught the moonlight. Victor Shaw. His throat went dry. "Then why put me in charge of her training?" Shaw's smile was thin. "Because pressure reveals truth. And now we know exactly who she is. Robert Morgan's daughter. Project Neptune reborn." Stomach turned. "You knew." "I suspected, and now I'm sure, which means she can't leave this base alive." Hesitated. "Killing a recruit." Shaw's voice cut like a blade. "She's not a recruit, she's a threat, and threats must be eliminated." Nodded stiffly, but inside, fear coiled tight. Shaw's orders weren't suggestions. They were death sentences for those who disobeyed as much as for those they targeted. The next morning awoke before dawn, the barracks still dark. She slipped outside, compass in hand, letting the needle settle. North. Always north. She thought of her father, of his steady voice, of the life stolen from him by the same men now circling her. Westbrook found her there, standing in the pale light. Couldn't sleep either. Shook her head. Too much noise. Sarah stood beside her, silent for a long while. Then she said softly, "Used to stand like that, before big tests, like she was listening to something only she could hear." His lips pressed tight. She didn't answer, but Sarah's words cut deep. She wasn't here just for herself. She was carrying ghosts. The whistle blew, calling them back. Another day, another gauntlet. And as marched into formation's eyes locked on hers, cold, final. Because this time, he wasn't planning a near miss. This time he was planning the end. Why did the air feel heavier that morning, like the whole base was holding its breath? Recruits shuffled in formation, but their chatter was muted. Something in stride, the sharp snap of his orders, told them today would be different. Felt it too, the prickle at the back of her neck, the subtle shift in atmosphere when danger stalked unseen. He paced before them, voice crisp, mask of authority hiding something darker. "Today we push harder, fail, and you don't belong here." His eyes lingered on her. Not long, not obvious, just enough for her to know. His pulse stayed steady. Outwardly she was still the quiet recruit, scar hidden, tattoo concealed, fatigue brushed across her face. But inside, every instinct sharpened. Today wasn't just training. Today was a stage and was setting it. The assignment was a field march. 40 pounds of gear. 10 miles of mud, sweat, and blistering sun. For recruits, it was meant to grind them down, test endurance. For it was something else, bait. She knew he'd strike when she was isolated, when fatigue was high, when help was far. Westbrook marched parallel, clipboard in hand, but her eyes never left. Since the night in her quarters, since listening to his voice captured on that recorder, she had stopped seeing as just another trainee. She saw a fighter carrying weight most people never could, and she knew was going to push her toward the edge again. Hours bled into aching steps. Mud clung heavy to boots. Blisters burst. Wilson fell behind, cursing under her breath. Carried her own pack and half of Wilson's when the girl nearly collapsed. The others noticed. Whispers spread. The silent recruit, the one mocked daily, she carried more than anyone else and didn't complain. But noticed too. His jaw clenched. He barked orders louder, punishing the entire unit for her strength, push-ups in the mud, sprint drills until lungs burned. Each command sharpened into cruelty, his fury aimed like a blade at her. Finally, at mile 9, it happened. He called for a rest by the tree line. Recruits dropped their packs, panting, motioned to Morgan with me. She followed without hesitation. Westbrook's gut twisted. Her clipboard trembled in her grip. She knew what was coming, but regulation chained her in place. To intervene without proof would mean career suicide. Led into the trees just far enough to be unseen. He turned suddenly, stepping close, voice low and venomous. "You think you're clever, don't you? Playing the hero, carrying others, making me look weak." His expression didn't change. "I'm just doing my job, sir." His laugh was bitter. "Your job is to follow orders, nothing more." He leaned closer, his breath hot with whiskey. "But you're not just a recruit, are you? I know, Shaw knows, you're your father's daughter." Her stomach tightened, though she didn't flinch. "You don't know what you're talking about." His grin widened. "Don't I? Project Neptune, Robert Morgan, you wear his mark on your skin. Whitman saw it, Shaw confirmed it, and that means you're dangerous." His pulse hammered. If Shaw knew, the game had changed. This wasn't about suspicion anymore, it was exposure. Step back, eyes narrowing. Accidents happen in training. Recruits fall behind, recruits collapse, and no one questions it. You'll be no different. His hand brushed the compass in her pocket. Her father's voice whispered through memory. "Every environment has advantages. Find them." Her voice stayed calm. "If you know who I am, then you know killing me won't stop this. It'll only prove me right." For the first time, doubt flickered across his face, but only for a second. His sneer returned. "Then maybe we make it look like you quit, like you weren't strong enough. That's fitting, isn't it? The daughter of a ghost breaking like the rest." A twig snapped behind them. Westbrook. She stepped out of the trees, voice sharp, steady. "That's enough, Sergeant." "Spun, this is between me and the recruit." "No," Sarah said, moving closer, eyes locked on his. "This is about abuse of authority. I've watched you push her past regulation again and again. Yesterday you nearly drowned her. Today you try to break her in the woods. I won't stay silent." For a moment the forest was silent. Birds stilled. The air thickened. Watched's face harden, calculation behind his eyes. He couldn't strike her here, not with Westbrook watching, not with other recruits within earshot. But his words dripped with venom. "You think you're protecting her. You've just signed your own transfer order, Lieutenant. Shaw doesn't forgive disobedience." Westbrook's throat tightened at the name. He knew she knew. And that meant her sister's shadow was no longer just hers. It was now wide open, a weapon in his hand. Stepped forward, putting herself between them. "You won't touch her." Laughed coldly. "You can't protect her, you can't protect anyone. That's why your father's gone. That's why Shaw wins, always." The words landed like blows, but didn't flinch. She held his gaze until he turned away, fury barely contained. Back at formation, recruits sensed the shift. Barked fewer orders, but his eyes burned. Westbrook walked closer to now, not hiding it anymore. And Wilson, limping from blisters, muttered, "Whatever he's got against you, he's scared. I can see it." That night sat in Westbrook's quarters again, the recorder on the desk. Sarah's hands shook as she poured 2 cups of stale coffee. He said Shaw's name, out loud. "He knows we're onto him." Nodded, which means Shaw knows too. "The window is closing. If we don't act now, evidence won't matter. They'll erase it, and us." Sarah's voice trembled. "What do you mean act?" Leaned forward, eyes sharp. "We draw him out, make him think he's in control, but we choose the ground. We set the terms. Then we expose him with Shaw listening." Sarah swallowed. That's not a plan, that's suicide. His fingers brushed the compass, her father's voice steady in memory. Sometimes survival isn't about living. It's about leaving behind what they can't bury. Her eyes locked on Sarah's. It's the only way. Across town in a darkened office, Shaw listened to his call replayed through encrypted channels. Westbrook's voice, his defiance, all of it, his lips curled into a smile. "They're exactly where we want them," he murmured. His aide asked, "Should I move assets to the base?" Shaw shook his head. "Not yet. Pressure makes diamonds or corpses. Let believe he's in control, and when he fails," Shaw's smile widened, "I'll handle the rest personally." Didn't sleep that night. She lay awake listening to the base breathe. Around her, recruits dreamed of promotions, futures, lives they hoped for. She stared at the ceiling, her chest heavy with ghosts. Her father, the ones it broken, the ones Shaw had erased. In the silence, she whispered a vow only the darkness could hear. "This ends with me." Why did silence feel louder than gunfire? Sat on the edge of her bunk, boots laced tight, eyes fixed on the floor. Around her, recruits snored, restless in their sleep. But inside her, everything was sharp. The stillness before a storm. She could feel it pressing against her ribs like a weight. Had cracked. She saw it in the twitch of his hands, the shake of his voice when Westbrook confronted him in the trees. He had been exposed, just enough to know his leash was tightening. And men like him, when cornered, became unpredictable. Westbrook's words from the night before still echoed. "That's not a plan, that's suicide." Maybe it was, but knew the truth. Survival wasn't about outlasting predators. It was about forcing them to reveal their teeth for everyone else to see. And his teeth were sharp, but Shaw's hand held the leash. At dawn, the base awoke. Drills, formation, the daily grind, but beneath it all tension coiled. Wilson glanced at, then quickly looked away. Even the other recruits felt it. Something was building, something they couldn't name. Later, in a locked storage room, and Sarah sat with the recorder, mapping every word, every second of audio they had collected. Override at the pool, his confrontation in the woods, and now fragments of whispered calls Sarah had intercepted with access codes she wasn't supposed to have. Static, then Shaw's voice, smooth and commanding. "She's Robert Morgan's daughter. She can't leave alive." Sarah's hands trembled as she stopped the playback. "We have him. We have Shaw." Shook her head. "Not enough. It's not admissible. They'll call it doctored, fabricated. He's too careful. We need him on record, direct." Sarah's voice broke. "How do you plan to do that?" His eyes didn't waver. "By giving him exactly what he wants." Sarah stared at her, horrified. "You mean bait?" Didn't answer. She didn't need to. The silence said enough. That evening, gathered the recruits for night maneuvers. A navigation drill in the wetlands beyond the perimeter fence. Darkness pressed thick, swamp water slick and cold under the moon. Perfect ground for accidents. Walked into the marsh, compass steady in her palm. North, always north. Around her, recruits slogged through knee-deep mud, cursing under their breath. Westbrook shadowed from a distance, radio at her hip, nerves on fire. His voice cut through the dark. "Morgan, take point." She obeyed, moving into the reeds, every sense alert. She knew what was coming. The swamp was cover, the night a veil, a perfect place to vanish. Minutes passed, then movement, the snap of a branch, too deliberate to be chance. She slowed, eyes narrowing. And then was on her. A sudden shove, sending her staggering into the muck. His hand pinned her shoulder, his voice low and venomous. "End of the line, Morgan." She didn't fight, not yet. Her body stayed slack, her breathing controlled. The recorder, hidden beneath her jacket, captured every syllable. "You think you're stronger than me. You think Whitman, Hayes, even Westbrook can protect you. They won't. Shaw owns this base. Shaw owns everything, and he wants you gone." His heart pounded, but her voice stayed calm. "Then do it. Make it look like an accident. That's what you do, isn't it? Drown them, break them, erase them." His grip tightened. "Your father thought he was untouchable too, and look where he is now." The words sliced through her like steel. Her father, always him, but held still, forcing herself to absorb the pain, to let it etch itself into memory, because this was evidence. This was the moment. But before could push further, another voice cut through the dark, sharp, furious. "Step away from her, Westbrook." She burst through the reeds, sidearm drawn, regulation forgotten. The beam of her flashlight cut across them, illuminating twisted snarl's mud-streaked face. "Put your hands where I can see them," Sarah ordered. Froze, then laughed bitterly. "You're in deeper than you realize, Lieutenant. You pull that trigger and Shaw will bury you too." Sarah's hand trembled, but her eyes didn't waver. "Not if I have your voice recorded. Not if I have every word you just said." For a split second, panic flickered across his face. Then rage consumed it. He lunged at again, only this time she was ready. She twisted, using his momentum, driving her elbow into his ribs. He staggered back, gasping. She rose from the mud, stance firm, steady. No longer the silent recruit. Not anymore. The swamp erupted in chaos. Recruits shouted, lights swung wildly. Wilson's voice cracked through the dark. "What's happening?" Stood tall, mud dripping from her uniform, eyes blazing. "It's over." But it was. Because in that moment, as Westbrook cuffed with trembling hands, as recruits gathered in shocked silence, caught it, a red light blinking in the trees. A transmitter. Her stomach dropped. Shaw had been listening. Miles away, in a secure room lit by monitors, Shaw leaned forward, smile cold. His rant, his defiance, Westbrook's trembling order, it was all recorded, but not in their favor. Shaw would twist it, manipulate it, bury it. He turned to his aide. "Prepare transport, I'm going to the base. This ends tonight." Back in the swamp, felt it like a shift in the wind. The game had escalated. The predator was no longer content to hunt from afar. He was coming himself. And she knew what that meant. There would be no second chances. Later, in Westbrook's quarters, the two of them sat in silence, locked away under guard. Sarah's hands shook as she replayed the recorder, listening again and again to his words. But's focus was elsewhere. Her compass lay on the table, its needle steady north. She turned it slowly in her hands, her father's voice whispering through memory. "Sometimes you don't get to choose the battlefield. Sometimes it chooses you." She looked up at Sarah. Her eyes were calm, but her voice carried steel. "Shaw's coming." Sarah's breath caught. "How do you know?" "Set the compass down. Because he wants to finish it himself." And for the first time, Sarah understood. This wasn't just about, it wasn't even just about. It was about a system that fed on silence, on fear, on shadows. The storm wasn't coming. It was already here. Why did the night feel endless? The base was quiet, but it wasn't peace. It was the silence before glass shatters, knew it in her bones. The compass in her palm trembled slightly with her own heartbeat, though its needle stayed true. North. Always north. She wondered if her father had felt this same stillness on the nights before his missions, when you knew tomorrow wasn't guaranteed. At 200, headlights split the darkness. A convoy rolled through the gates, unannounced, unauthorized, yet unquestioned. At the center sat a black sedan. From it stepped Victor Shaw. He moved like he owned the ground beneath his boots, like every shadow bent to him. His suit was immaculate, his jawline but sharp, his eyes glacial. Recruits whispered from their bunks, watching through slits in blinds. They didn't know who he was, but did. Westbrook stood waiting near the command office, pulse hammering in her throat. She had seen his photo in buried files. Now in flesh, he was worse, more real, more dangerous. She gripped the flash drive in her pocket like a lifeline. Shaw didn't glance at her. He looked straight to who stood motionless under the floodlights, as if she had been waiting for him. Their eyes met, predator and prey, or perhaps two predators circling. "Lieutenant Morgan," Shaw said smoothly. His voice carried the weight of someone who never needed to raise it. "Or do you prefer operative?" Murmurs rippled through those gathered. had already been silenced, locked away under watch. But here was the man behind him, bold, untouchable. Didn't blink, I prefer. Shaw's smile was thin. Your father would be proud or maybe horrified. Hard to say, really. He was always too stubborn to know when he was beaten. Her jaw tightened, but her voice stayed calm. You buried him, just like Westbrook, just like the others. Shaw's eyes flicked briefly to Sarah, enough to remind her of the power he held. Then back to, you're brave, I'll give you that, but brave doesn't win wars. Silence does, control does, and right now you have neither. His hand brushed the recorder at her side, hidden. It was live, transmitting. Every word spilling into a secure channel Hayes had opened hours earlier. She didn't need to win a fight tonight. She needed him to reveal himself. You think you control everything, she said quietly, but control slips when people stop being afraid. Shaw stepped closer, his presence suffocating. And are you not afraid? She looked him dead in the eye. Every day, but I don't let it decide for me. For the first time, his smile cracked, his voice dropped. You're your father's child. He said the same thing once, just before the ocean swallowed him. The words hit her like a blow, but she didn't let him see it. She forced herself to breathe, to remember her father's voice. Fear is natural. Cowardice is a choice. Behind her, Sarah's radio clicked twice, the signal. Hayes and Whitman were listening. The trap was working. But Shaw wasn't careless. His eyes flicked to the trees where two men stepped into view, armed. His insurance, his control. Westbrook's breath caught. Her sidearm was holstered but against two rifles. Her hand trembled near it. She thought of her smile, of the last note that hadn't been her handwriting. She thought of what Shaw had stolen. Sensed it. She shifted slightly, putting herself between Sarah and Shaw's men. She didn't draw a weapon. She didn't move like a soldier. She moved like a shield. Shaw's voice sharpened. This is your last chance. Walk away. Disappear. I'll even let Westbrook live, but stay and you'll both be erased. The swamp still clung to his boots. Muddy, heavy, but her spine was steel, her voice steady. No. The word landed like a strike. The silence that followed was electric. Shaw's men raised their rifles. Sarah's pulse pounded. Time slowed. Then the wail of sirens. Floodlights blazed. Armed MPs swarmed the courtyard, weapons drawn. Whitman himself strode forward, Hayes at his side. Hayes held a receiver, Shaw's words echoing through it, recorded, undeniable. Victor Shaw, Hayes said sharply, her voice cutting the night. You're under arrest for conspiracy, unlawful command influence, and the cover-up of multiple deaths in service. For the first time, Shaw's composure cracked, just for a second. Then he laughed low and dark. You think this ends me. You have no idea how deep this goes. His men hesitated, then dropped their weapons under the floodlights. Shaw stood tall, unflinching, as cuffs closed around his wrists. Finally exhaled. Not victory, not relief, just a release she hadn't allowed herself until now. Westbrook's knees nearly buckled, the weight of years collapsing into this moment. She clutched the flash drive in her pocket, tears stinging her eyes. His ghost wasn't silenced anymore. The truth was out. As Shaw was led away, he turned his head, locking eyes with one last time. You may have won this round, but wars don't end with arrests. They end with graves. Didn't answer, she didn't need to. Hours later, dawn broke over the base. Recruits lined up, whispering about the night's chaos. Was gone. Shaw was gone. But something deeper lingered, the awareness that power wasn't always held by those with rank, but by those willing to stand when silence was safer. Sat on a bench, mud still on her boots, compass warm in her palm. Sarah sat beside her, holding his photograph. They didn't speak for a long time. Words felt too small. Finally, Sarah whispered, she would have been proud of you. His throat tightened. I'm not the one who deserves pride. You kept fighting even when no one listened. Sarah shook her head, tears slipping free. No, we fought because you reminded me how. Slipped the compass into Sarah's hand. For a moment, Sarah resisted, but pressed it firmly into her palm. Keep it. North never changes, neither should truth. The sun climbed higher, light spilling across the water, the parade ground, the scars no one could see. Breathed it in the air, the silence, the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, silence wouldn't always win. And as the camera of memory pulled back, the moral settled, quiet as dawn. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts.